Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Tyler, and today we are going to be recapping the Orioles series win over the Seattle Mariners. But before we do that, I do want to remind everyone that we are sponsored this month by Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. You can head over to betonline.ag to get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. So head to their website today. Again, that's betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we just want to thank BetOnline for being a sponsor of the Warehouse Podcast this month. Thank you again to BetOnline. But all right. So before we get into a recap of the game action, I did want to go over a couple of news items that came through over the weekend related to the Orioles, and they're kind of significant ones. So first off, Grayson Rodriguez was reinstated from the IL, which isn't too surprising. We'd heard for a while he was kind of nursing that injury. It was sort of just some shoulder inflammation, a little bit of discomfort there, but nothing super serious. He went on the IL. And it was retroactive to April 30th. So he came off on the 18th, which was just a little bit over that 15-day minimum stay. Did not require a rehab stint or anything like that. He just threw a couple bullpens. It sounded for the longest time like there was not going to be a rehab. I think I had alluded to this on an episode recently where Jim Palmer was even saying, like, if he gets back pretty close to that 15-day stint, he's not going to need a rehab stint. It's very similar to, skipping a start if someone's kind of feeling a little bit under the weather, for a portion of the season or whatever. So very good news. Grayson Rodriguez has been reinstated from the IL. Now, the counter move was always going to be interesting because if, a good resource for this is roster resource on Fangraphs. If you go over there, you can kind of look at the makeup of the roster. And it also includes a column for options, what players have options left. And this is helpful when you're thinking and theorizing about a player coming off the IL, who's going to be the make weight to kind of create room on the roster. And the other element of this that is tricky is that, you can't have more than 13 pitchers on your active roster at a time. So, whereas when you're bringing a hitter back, you can kind of say, all right, well, let's just go with a long bench for a bit. We'll short the pitching staff for a bit, go with 12 pitchers, 14 hitters, we'll make it work. You can't do the opposite where you can say, all right, let's go with a really short bench, and let's go with 14 pitchers for an amount of time and just 12 hitters. That's not allowed. I think it used to be, but recently when they expanded rosters, they didn't want teams to go crazy with the pitching staffs. I think it all ties into how many pitching moves you're making in a game. They want to speed up the game, all that stuff. So you're forced to have 13 pitchers or fewer on your roster at all times. The Orioles had 13 pitchers on their roster when they determined that Grayson Rodriguez was ready to come back. So they had to make a tough decision there, unless there was going to be some sort of an IL stint, which I know we've talked about in the past. Craig Kimbrell's had some back stuff. He'd been struggling. They've backed off him. Maybe there was an opportunity for an IL stint there. That didn't happen. And then beyond, an IL stint, you've got to look at guys that can be optioned, right? Well, the guys that can be optioned on the Orioles roster that are pitchers are Dean Kramer, Kyle Bradish, Rodriguez himself, which wasn't going to happen, Yennier Cano, and then Keegan Aiken. Kramer and Bradish, you're not going to option them. They're starting pitchers in general, pitching quite well. Bradish still working back from the injury a little bit, kind of getting, elongated, but he's obviously, you're not going to send him down. He was a Cy Young finalist last year. Then in the bullpen, Cano, he is kind of your non-Kimbrell closing option. He's not going to get sent down, was an all-star last year. And then Keegan Aiken, has an option. I think coming into the year, I expected Aiken to be a guy that kind of yo-yos a little bit. His last option year, let's utilize it. He's not a guy that felt coming into the year like a long-term piece for the Orioles bullpen, but he's been quite good for them this year. He's really valuable to the bullpen right now. And I don't think that's a guy that if you're trying to win games, you want down in AAA. It's different from Dylan Tate, who, while Tate's numbers were good, you could see some of the peripherals were a little bit suspect, and you could understand the need for him to go down to Norfolk, work on a couple of things, and maybe come back later in the season and be, a valuable piece, or if somebody gets hurt, whatever. Aiken has pretty consistently been very good for the Orioles. So while that might have been an angle there you could take, is say, let's keep all the talent in the organization. I agree with not sending Aiken down right now. So then you had to turn to guys who didn't have options left, were a little bit more fringy. And for me, that came down to Albert Suarez or Mike Baumann. Suarez, I know, is kind of a darling right now. He had a couple really good starts for the Orioles, has transitioned to the bullpen, has a fastball that still rates out really, really well. So I understand the admiration for him right now. But I think, he's 34, 35 years old, hasn't pitched in the league for a long time. How long can they ride this sort of hot streak he's on right now? I'm not so sure. Do you want to bet on that? I don't know. And then there's Mike Baumann, who I've talked about on this podcast before. I'm personally, a fan of his. I like his stuff, but the reality is that he hasn't been as productive as I think his stuff warrants he should be. And if you go back to last year, he was not on the playoff roster when he was an option. He was a guy they sent down later in the season as he struggled. He was somebody they could have put on the playoff roster. Instead, they went for Jacob Webb, who was, I think, a guy that coming into the season and at that time last year, I viewed in a similar vein to Baumann. He's clearly surpassed him at this point, so I don't even think they are on the same level. But Bauman's a guy they've given opportunities to. They've exhausted all his options, and I think you're kind of at this point where, as a middle relief pitcher, if you haven't figured it out by now, you probably aren't going to figure it out with your current team. Now, he's a guy that I think can go to a new environment, get some fresh eyes on him, get a new process going, and he can maybe unlock something. And that's my expectation, is that he will get claimed by someone. As of this recording, on the morning of Monday the 20th, he has not been claimed yet. But I think, that there's a couple days there where you're in DFA limbo and all the teams have to be given an opportunity to put in a claim. That hasn't gone through just yet. I'm expecting Baumann to be claimed by someone and to potentially they try him back out as a starter. He's not stretched out just yet, but he's a guy that has been a starter in the past. They might try that again, someone. If not, though, he can go right into somebody's bullpen. He's been plenty effective this year in terms of being a major league arm. It just hasn't clicked as well as, I think the Orioles would have hoped he could have. So, good luck to him. It's kind of a bummer to lose talent like that, especially, if you think coming into the year, talent wise, I think I would have put Baumann ahead of Aiken. I would have put him ahead of Webb. I would have put him, certainly ahead of Albert Suarez, who I didn't even really know about coming into the year. But, as things stand now, he just wasn't there anymore. Looking at his stats real quick, he had a solid 3.44 ERA, but his FIP was 4.46, his xFIP 4.65, only striking out 7.8 hitters per 9 innings, walking almost 4.5 per 9 innings. It's just, it just wasn't quite working out for him. So I think it's a good situation for him to go get some new eyes on him and hopefully unlock something. And then for the Orioles, maybe you're losing something in Baumann, but I think there's probably enough young guys down on the farm that if you need, somebody to come in and pitch the fifth inning or sixth inning or something, they can probably figure that out. It's not a guy you need to, bend over backwards to hang on to. But that said, he could go somewhere else and be fantastic. So a bummer to see Baumann go. He was a favorite of mine in terms of stuff and everything. It just didn't work out for him. So good luck to him. And then another guy who, is a familiar name, obviously, for Orioles fans, has been around a long time. He is officially gone from the organization now, is Ryan McKenna. So McKenna, he's been sort of the fourth outfielder for the Orioles for several seasons now. Coming into 2024, into the regular season, he was DFA'd by the Orioles, but at that time went unclaimed, went down to Norfolk, played fine, came up to the Orioles, kind of back in that fourth outfielder role. He hit a couple of home runs, went 3 for 8, 2 home runs. So that looks great. But obviously we know kind of what he is at this point, a 27-year-old who's been up and down a bunch of times. He's a guy that gives you good speed on the bases, but isn't necessarily going to steal bases. Typically plays good defense, although that was sort of an adventure for him recently too, where he was taking odd routes to the ball. And just, he's not a guy you had a lot of confidence in putting in the lineup. He was a guy that typically hit left-handers pretty well, which is something the Orioles do need a little bit more of, but not that he wasn't doing it to such a tremendous degree that you were going to put him in the lineup every time a tough lefty was on the mound. He wasn't like the Danny Valencia type of a couple of seasons ago. It just wasn't there for him. So he gets claimed by the Giants. And the Giants have obviously put him on the 40-man roster. He'll, I think, go to their big league team. I don't think he can be optioned, right? We just didn't option him. We DFA'd him. So he'll be in the mix of their outfield, alongside Mike Yastrzemski, another former Orioles farmhand that was in the organization for a long time, never got a shot here, but has unlocked something with the Giants. So maybe they can do something similar with McKenna. I hope for his sake they can. So again, not a surprising development there. I think what was kind of surprising, so McKenna was DFA'd when they brought Austin Hayes back off the IL. The same time they had optioned Heston Kjerstad down and brought Kyle Stowers up. So it's kind of interesting that they've essentially made the decision we want Stowers up instead of McKenna, kind of. We'd rather have Stowers on the major league roster than McKenna in the organization at all, is kind of the math there. I know McKenna and Stowers fulfill different needs. I think Hayes and McKenna are probably closer to one another than Stowers and McKenna, but Hayes is on the big league roster. Kjerstad's still in the minors. So essentially it was a swap of Stowers for McKenna. And I think that's an interesting decision to make there. I think ultimately Stowers has a much higher offensive ceiling than McKenna, but obviously not as fast on the bases, probably not as defensively adept as McKenna is. But I know a lot of people in the fan base are clamoring to see a longer look at Stowers. So again, not too upset about it at all. McKenna's had plenty of opportunities here with the Orioles. It hasn't really clicked for him, but I do continue to believe in his abilities as a fourth outfielder type. Like I said, he's got a lot of things that are helpful off the bench in terms of hitting lefties, running well, playing good defense. It just wasn't something that the Orioles really needed anymore at this point. I think, you've got Cowser who can kind of rove around and play different spots in the outfield. Austin Hayes could play center field in a pinch. Mullins is obviously a Gold Glove contender in center. So McKenna wasn't somebody they really needed anymore at this point. So hopefully he goes to San Francisco, has a good time, unlocks something. And semi sad to see him go. He has just been around for a long time, but time for the Orioles to turn the page there. And then the other bit of news is down in the minors, Coby Mayo has fractured a rib while trying to catch a foul ball into the dugout. He fell down the steps and fractured a rib. He's going to be out for several weeks. It sounds like they're expecting him back sometime in June, which is, really a bummer for him. He's been having a good season. He's hitting .291 with a .359 on base and a .605 slugging at AAA Norfolk this year. And I think he's a guy that definitely factors into the Orioles picture sometime this year. I can't say that I see him coming in and unseating anybody for an everyday role. He's not going to start over, Jordan Westburg, of course. He's playing so well. And not, not that him and Gunnar play the same position, but Gunner's going to play every day. So that's two positions sorted. And then at first base, the Mountcastle O'Hearn platoon has gone great at first base. So really that leaves, second base or third base because Westbrook can flip flop. Jorge Mateo is hitting great against left-handed pitching. He should start every day against lefties. So then you're really just trying to figure out something against righties at second base. And, there could be an avenue for Mayo to come in, play third on those days, and Westbrook switch over to second base. So the Orioles not in immediate need of an upgrade on the infield, but nonetheless, Mayo has played so well that if he's not a trade candidate for the Orioles to get an upgrade in the bullpen, or I think there was a rumor going around that they could look for right-handed offense in the outfield. If he doesn't factor into trade discussions there, I think he will be up at some point just because he's hitting so well that you might as well bring him up and maybe he comes in and makes some pinch hit opportunities at the very least in August and September or something like that. But, as far as clamoring for him to come up tomorrow, that'll subside for a bit as I think the Orioles are rightly going to take some time here, let him heal completely. There's absolutely no reason to rush him back. Let him heal completely and then get back into the groove of things at Norfolk and kind of go from there. So hopefully he's back in June and, fully revved up by late July when, any of those trade considerations could be had. Obviously the return for Mayo in a potential trade would have to be massive. He's played really, really well for the Orioles farm system in recent years and really catapulted himself into elite prospect territory. So a bummer to hear that news, but hopefully he bounces back really quickly. All right, let's turn to the games, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. I know I've already chewed up about 15 minutes talking about various news items that I felt were a little bit more important than the on-field stuff because the Orioles, it feels ridiculous to say, but the Orioles have gotten to the point in my brain where I'm like, okay, they're good. They're winning basically 2 out of every 3 games. They are. they're winning more than 2 out of every 3 games. They're winning just about every series they play. I expect them to win games now, and it almost becomes more about like the minutia off the field and the vibes and all that stuff. And I know that sounds silly to say, but like I'm expecting the Orioles to be in the playoffs. They've got some jostling to do right now to get up to that to win the AL East potentially against the Yankees, who are continuing to play really well. They need to keep winning these games, but I'm just sort of expecting, okay, the Orioles are going to win most series they play because they're better than most, if not all, teams in the AL. And from this point, I'm just kind of looking to, stay healthy, the roster flexibility, maintaining options, keeping things open. That's like what my brain is going to right now. So obviously, I'm watching the games. I'm loving the games. This team is so much fun to watch right now. But in my brain, I'm like, all right, it's all about October right now. The Orioles need to keep winning the games, and that's fine. But I'm thinking about what positions this team the best for October, and that's kind of how I'm viewing a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. So we're certainly going to talk about the games, but sorry for chewing up so much time talking about the off the field stuff. I know some people don't really care about that, but I find it really interesting right now. So game 1, the Orioles end up beating the Mariners 9-2. John Means pitches in this one, does a really nice job, goes 6 innings, allows 2 runs on 6 hits, no walks, 4 strikeouts, gives up the 1 home run. I think that for me continues to be like the story. Like I just said, I'm kind of thinking about October right now. Means needs to keep pitching the way he is. He started off so well against the Reds with that game where he was striking everybody out. Struggled a little bit in his second start, bounces back again here. And I think for him, what really it's all about is that changeup. He threw it 26% of the time here, got 8 whiffs on 15 swings, which is a 53% whiff rate. For Means, when his changeup is working, he's very difficult, especially against right-handed hitters. They just have a really tough time with him. And that's really like the long and the short of it for the lefty here. So it was nice to see him kind of come back, stick with his bread and butter. It's working, and he puts together a really nice start for the Orioles. Because I think with Means, I don't know what to expect from him, right? Because he came back late last year. The numbers were good, but he wasn't getting whiffs. He was very lucky to not allow runs. It was the kind of thing where the top line numbers don't match the feeling you get when he's pitching, which is how he pitched in 2021 before the injury. Was like every time he started it, it felt the way that it feels when Corbin Burns starts now, where it's like the Orioles are going to be in this game. In 2021, they might not win the game because the team's bad, but they're going to be right in the game. And this is like the one game out of every 5 I'm excited to watch because John Means is on the mound and the Orioles might win the game. Now, flash forward to 2024, I feel like the Orioles can win every game because all of their starting pitchers are quite good. And with Means, I needed to still get there, right? Because he just wasn't pitching great at the end of last year, had the injury stuff, missed a month this year. We're still kind of waiting to figure out what he is. And so far, he's been very impressive for me. When that changeup is working, as it has been for most of his career, he is just very tough to hit. And it was good to see John Means pitch really well in this game. And then the offense scored 9 runs after really struggling. I think they'd scored 3 or fewer runs in like their previous 5 games or something like that coming into it. They explode for 5 runs in the first inning off of Bryce Miller, a really good pitcher for the Mariners. And that's another kind of through line of this whole series is the Orioles did pretty well against the Seattle Mariners starting pitchers, who are arguably the best starting pitchers in the league. And they got like the teeth of it with Miller and Castillo and Kirby. And the Orioles navigated it pretty darn well. So again, impressive there. But the Orioles score 5 runs in the bottom of the first, and then don't score again until the 7th, where they score 4 more runs. So, you'd like to see a little bit more consistency there. But if you put up 2 crooked numbers over 9 innings, you're probably going to win that game. Again, the goal is kind of always to score like 5 or more runs. If you score 5 or more runs, you're probably winning a Major League Baseball game. And the Orioles did that nearly twice in individual innings there in this game. So, 5 runs in the first, 4 in the 7th, 9 overall. Henderson hits a home run, which is something he did in every game of this series. Let's see here. Cowser had 2 hits and 2 RBIs. Cowser had a nice series. And Rutschman had a pair of hits. It was a good offensive game for the Baltimore Orioles here. So all in, good stuff to score runs. Means pitches well. All positives there. Then in game 2, they fall 4-3 to the Seattle Mariners. This was a game where Grayson Rodriguez comes back. This was Preakness Saturday. The game was delayed for hours as it was raining all around Baltimore. Which was kind of interesting to me that they decided, okay, this is the day we're going to activate Rodriguez is, I know it wasn't like a knee injury or anything, and it wasn't necessarily very serious, but typically when you have a guy coming off the IL, you like to push that to a day when the weather is perfect, and it certainly wasn't on this game. But Rodriguez was fantastic. Ends up going 6 innings, allows just 1 hit, walks 3, but strikes out 7, no runs. Just immense here. He's a guy that I've talked about it for a while. He just has it. He's a guy that, the Orioles probably aren't going to sign Corbin Burns again after this season if, logic holds. But I feel okay about it because Grayson Rodriguez is pitching so well right now. He looks like a horse. It's just exactly what this Orioles organization needed, was for Grayson Rodriguez to come up and be everything he was promised to be, and he is exactly that. Obviously, Bradish being as good as he is, hopefully there's no long-term injury concerns there. Of course, there are going to be, but Rodriguez being so good is just so helpful for the Orioles and their long-term viability with this current core. It's just so important. He had the good velocity, maxed out at 98.4 miles per hour. Slider was really good. 6 whiffs on 11 swings for a 55% whiff rate. Had the change up a little bit too. 3 whiffs on 9 swings and threw 82 total pitches. So again, he wasn't at his absolute maximum version. The Orioles held him back a little bit. He probably could have gone a 7th inning, but again, as I've said, it's all about October for the Orioles. And I think if you look at how they manage these ball games, they are acting as if it is all about October. They're not pushing these guys to their absolute limit every single game. They're navigating the Craig Kimbrell issues right now by kind of keeping him in low pressure situations to build up his confidence and get him back to a point where he can close and win important games. Burns gets pulled after 6 innings a lot of the time. We'll talk about that again here. The Orioles are managing every single game as if they're trying to win games in October, not necessarily win games in May, which, the Yankees have a better record right now. The Yankees feel like an unstoppable force, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But the Orioles got some experience last year of, winning 101 games. That felt great, but it felt maybe even worse to get swept in the ALDS to, yes, the eventual World Series champions. But they seem to be navigating things a little bit differently this year, which is, I think, something worth following. So positives, Rodriguez was good. The bullpen stunk. Danny Coulombe struggled, gave up 2 hits, 2 runs in just a third of an inning. Albert Suarez came in after that and did allow those inherited runs to score. Got, the rest of those, the other 2 outs in that inning. Yenier Cano came in. He struggled, gave up 2 runs on 2 hits. And then Cionel Perez came in to throw the final inning in 2/3. He looked all right, though. Just 1 hit, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts. So Cano not good. Coulombe not good. That's going to be a problem, as those have been 2 of your best arms this year. And, it continues that I think is true, that the Orioles bullpen in general is good. It is competent. It is not elite, though, and it lacks that obvious one arm that I think you feel can get anybody out in the league. They just don't have that right now, and they probably won't have that until, I think the trade deadline comes, and they're going to have to do something. But it kind of reared its head there, where they lost a game that they probably could have won. They probably should have won. Rodriguez pitched well, but again, the offense didn't do great. Henderson hits a home run. Mateo has a double. Westberg a triple. Mateo was the only guy with 2 hits, and Cowser, although he didn't get any hits, walked 3 times, which again is kind of the interesting dichotomy with him. He's a guy that can be patient when you need him to be, and he can be the guy that hacks away and gets you some power input on other days. But the offense only scores 3 runs. They lose 4-3. And again, you kind of got to score 5 runs to be sure you're going to win. Orioles offense didn't do that, and they kind of disappeared a little bit down the stretch here. Scored in the 2nd and 3rd, didn't score again in the game. And, that happens. Luis Castillo is really good, and he shuts people down, and the Mariners bullpen followed that up. And what can you say? Their bullpen was better than the Orioles bullpen on this day. And finally, we move on to game 3, in which the Orioles win the rubber game 6-3 on the back of Corbin Burns. Once again, going 6 innings, allowing 1 run on 7 hits, 1 walk, and tying his season high of 11 strikeouts in a game. He last struck out 11 back on opening day. And finally, for Burns, he gets some support behind him as the Orioles score those 6 runs I mentioned before. Burns, I think, had lost 4 straight starts, or the Orioles had lost 4 of Burns's starts in a row because they had scored 2 or fewer runs in all 4 of them. They finally break out for 6 runs in this game, and Burns looked fantastic. He does give up the 7 hits, but only walks the 1 and strikes out 11. It was the kind of performance that I think people have been talking about for a little bit with him. Is he's been good, obviously, this year, but he hasn't been getting a ton of strikeouts as he normally does. We saw him look crazy overpowering back on opening day, but he hasn't really been that guy since then. Still obviously fantastic, and the Orioles should be winning most of the games he pitches because he just does so well. But he hadn't been striking out a bunch of guys like that. Does it here. Brought the curveball back. That's a pitch he's kind of been, moving up and down his use, chart for a while here. Used it quite a bit here. Got 5 whiffs on 7 swings, but a lot of times it was them just kind of looking at it because it's just so different from all of his other pitches. It's got such a different, profile to it going up rather than side to side that I think that it just kind of takes hitters off balance, keeps them off balance a little bit, and helps him kind of just dominate his way through a game. Looks good there. Also, 7 of 8 on whiffs per swings on his slider. Sorry, I said that weird. 7 whiffs on 8 swings, which is an 88% whiff rate for his slider. That looked good. And then his cutter wasn't getting a ton of whiffs, but it was, velocity wise right where it needs to be. And it's the kind of pitch that because he throws that, 95 miles per hour, and then his curveball's coming in at 78, his slider at 85. He's got you from all angles, all velocities. It's just a tough, guy to match up against. So Burns, fantastic there. Offensively, Orioles, 6 runs. Henderson homers again. Third game, he homers. Just looks like an MVP candidate. He stole a base as well, I believe, in this game. Yes, so did Mullins and Mateo. Mullins, that's another important guy. Got 2 hits. He's a guy that is so important to this team defensively at this point. He's not the 30-30 guy he was once upon a time, but his defense is still so fantastic in center field. They need him in the lineup every day for that alone, but his bat has got to be viable. After this game, he's still batting just 194 with a 592 OPS. Not great, but he gets off the schneid a little bit here with 2 hits, 2 RBIs. He stole a base. Really important for the Orioles to get Cedric Mullins going, even if he's their 8 or 9 hitter, in the ALDS or whatever. He's playing Gold Glove defense, but if he's hitting, 240 and he can steal you a bag, and he can just get out of his own way a little bit. He's so important to this team defensively and can be a spark plug on offense when he's going. So love to see him going a little bit. Cowser with 3 more hits. Also, Cowser, I don't know whether this is like a positive for him or not, but there was a ball down in the corner. It was a double with a runner on first base. Cal Raleigh, I think, was on first base. Tries to round the bases to get all the way home. Cowser, who's playing right field in this game, gathers it up after fumbling it first, fires to Mateo, pretty much a perfect, throw. Mateo had to jump a little bit. Mateo collects it, throws home to McCann, who's catching while Rutschman's off for the day, applies the tag to Raleigh at home, saves a run for the Orioles, and that was just because it was hit the cutoff man goes home, and the guy's out. Cowser has had some trouble with the cutoff man this year, especially when playing left field. He's missed the cutoff man a couple of times that I can remember off the top of my head. That sort of cost the Orioles an extra base or run or whatever. Hits the cutoff man here, and they get the out. I think that's improvement there from the rookie. So love to see that paired with a 3-hit day, 2 runs, and RBI. Cowser is kind of bouncing back from, really good to start the season, looking like the AL Rookie of the Year favorite, trails off a little bit, and now he's back to where he was just a few weeks ago. Love to see that kind of thing where the guy is adjusting to the league after the league has adjusted to him. So love to see that from Cowser. Bullpen was better Sunday. Jacob Webb, not good for him. He comes in, doesn't get any outs. I think faced 3 hitters, walked 2 of them, allowed 1 hit. Cole Irvin comes in. Big day for Irvin. Comes in, cleans up Webb's mess, does allow a run to score after he comes in, but gets a double play and then gets out of it. Stays on for another inning to give the Orioles some length out of the bullpen. And then Craig Kimbrell comes in for a 3-run save, strikes out 2, and looks pretty good while doing it. That's huge for the Orioles, obviously. They need Craig Kimbrell to be Craig Kimbrell. They don't need him to be Craig Kimbrell of a decade ago, but they need him to be the guy he was early on this season where he was coming in, efficient, pounding the strikes out, and still looking pretty nasty. Like, yeah, he's got 2 pitches, but they are 2 good pitches still. They just need Craig Kimbrell back there. I'm not saying they shouldn't still upgrade on the closer role, but they need his confidence up. This was a good opportunity to do it. Up 3 runs. It felt pretty low pressure as far as a save situation goes, and he gets the job done there to close out the win for the Orioles. Huge for him, huge for the Orioles. It's his 9th save of the season. So, yeah, I mean, that's the long and the short of the series. I know I kind of buzzed through that really quickly. As far as MVP, I'd have to give it to Henderson. I think home runs in all 3 games. He's just such a difference maker. He's a guy that I think is on pace right now for some ridiculous number of home runs, like 50 home runs or something like that, at the shortstop position while stealing bases and potentially being a Gold Glove type of guy. Like he's playing that kind of defense right now. I'm just blown away by Gunnar Henderson right now. It's just fantastic to watch. And I think you got to talk about, the best player since whatever, or the best Orioles since whatever. Right now, he is as good as and as impactful as Manny Machado was in his heyday, but he also adds kind of the element of speed that Manny didn't really have. Manny was more of an average runner. Gunnar is well above average there. Is as good of a defender at short as I think Manny was at third. That might be a little bit blasphemous to say because Manny was just so good at third base. Gunnar might not be quite there, but he's playing shortstop instead of third base. And then just the stuff he does at the plate is ridiculous. The bat speed, how hard he hits the ball, he's amazing. The command he has of the strike zone, like yeah, he's gonna whiff, but he's usually swinging at strikes when he whiffs. And if he doesn't swing at a 2-strike pitch, it's usually because it's off the plate or whatever. He's just fantastic. And all the superlatives you want to hurl towards him, I am more than open to. But yeah, Gunnar Henderson, just fantastic in this series. And then as far as who kind of disappointed me here, Jacob Webb was not fantastic in this series. Trying to think who else wasn't great. Danny Coulomb kind of coughed up the game. And you know what? I'll just hand it to the bullpen in this one. Not the bullpen was terrible, but really you've got to put game 2 at their feet a little bit. Yes, the offense should have scored more runs, but they didn't. And you need to win some games that you only score, a couple of runs. They got to win some of those games. The bullpen, I think, for the most part, has gotten the job done this year, but game 2 was not one of their finest hours. So I'll just give least valuable to the bullpen in general. As for what comes next for the Orioles, this is a good opportunity this week for the Orioles to pick up some wins, hopefully pick up a couple games on the New York Yankees. They go to St. Louis now for a 3-game set against the Cardinals. The Cardinals have not been great this year. I think they've played a little bit better recently, but in general, not great for the Cardinals this season. They are 20-26 going into the series. It'll be Dean Kramer against Sonny Gray on Monday. That game starts at 7:45 on MASN 2. On Tuesday, it is Kyle Bradish against Lance Lynn. Again, a 7:45 game on MASN 2. And then Wednesday is the getaway day, a 1:15 p.m. start. That's John Means going against our old friend Kyle Gibson. That is on MASN 2 as well. And if you are out of the MASN serving area, you should be able to get it on MLB Network. So it'll be, nice to see Kyle Gibson. He's pitching exactly how you would expect Kyle Gibson to pitch. 3-2 record for the Cardinals, a 4.09 ERA, a nice little reunion on the road there. And then I won't get into this too much, but then the Orioles go to Chicago for 4 games against the White Sox, who are awful. I'm not going to say you need to sweep that series, but I'm feeling like you should be winning 3 out of 4 against a team that is putrid. And the Orioles want to be winning, 100 games again, winning the AL East. They got to make the most out of that. I think the Yankees just finished up with the White Sox and swept them. I would love for the Orioles to do the same, but I'm hoping they get at least 3 out of 4 there. So yeah, it's an opportunity this week in the middle of the country to win some games against some bad teams. So really got my fingers crossed there. And yeah, I mean, that's about the long and the short of it. It was a good weekend in Baltimore. Preakness happened. It was rainy, but no horses got hurt. The Orioles won 2 out of 3. So tough to complain about the sports this weekend in the Charm City. So I want to remind everybody to follow the podcast on social media. We are on X and on Threads at The Warehouse Pod. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your shows. That is where we are available. So check us out there. You can email the podcast, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. And please, wherever you enjoy us, whether it be on your podcast app, on YouTube, where you can also subscribe for free, please give us a rating. A 5-star rating would be awesome. Helps us get to other Orioles fans. We'd really appreciate it. And you can at least give us a like on YouTube. That, again, helps us get out there to folks. And if you're on YouTube right now, give us a comment down below and tell us who your most valuable player was from this series. I said Gunnar Henderson, but you could also hand it out to Colton Cowser. He was really good this weekend. You could hand it out to Corbin Burns. He was fantastic. Even Grayson Rodriguez, they lost the game, but he was awesome. 1 hit over 6 innings. Your first start off the IL is fantastic stuff. So let us know in the comments who you would give the most valuable player to in this series. Besides that, though, I would encourage you all to go over to believe.com, BLEAV.com. Check out our podcast there, but also check out all other kinds of podcasts for your other preferred sports teams. I think they've got other, common interest podcasts as well. So check out believe.com. They are the network we're on this season. We're really appreciative of all their support. And also, I just want to remind everybody, we are presented by Bet Online this month. Again, betonline.ag for all of your lines, stats, all that kind of stuff. Check them out and get your betting on over there. But that's all I've got for this episode of the Warehouse Podcast. I thank you all so much for tuning in and checking us out. Subscribe and keep in the loop for all of our stuff that way. And yeah, thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.